Congratulations, Netflix, you did it again. You did it again. Another waste of my time. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the channel. I am Nick, and today we're going to be reviewing the latest film on Netflix called Apex. The story of this movie is a grieving woman pushing her limits on a solo adventure in the Australian wild is ensnared in a twisted game with a cunning killer who thinks that she's prey. Now, I have this dynamic going on where Charlize Theron and Taron Edgerton are basically in this cat and mouse chase where Charlize Theron is being chased by Taron Edgerton in the wilderness. They do this weird setup and everything where she's basically asking him for directions at a gas station. He tells her where to go and like this really nice spot in the wilderness for her to like get some fresh water and everything. She goes there and then guess who shows up at that specific location? Taron Edgerton, and then they do this whole thing where he turns just out of the blue cartoonishly evil, and then the movie goes on where he's just chasing her through. Now, the biggest problem with this movie, though, is that there's absolutely zero tension in this at all. You click play, you see the setup, you see all of that unfold where he just shows up at the location and is like, yeah, I am going to try to kill you. That should have a lot of like big tension and quick edits, everything, like create this really interesting thing. But no, this movie doesn't do that in the slightest. It just doesn't feel like there's any tension going on at all. Taron Edgerton playing this killer, you can clearly tell that he is having so much fun playing this dangerous madman, but that's the issue with watching this. It doesn't feel like you're watching a dangerous madman. It feels like you're watching Taron Edgerton have so much fun playing the dangerous madman, and he does a fine job. It's just the way they wrote the character and just the way that the whole vibe of the movie is. He obviously has dangerous moments where you get reveals about his past and what he's been doing in the wilderness. You get a sense of, holy crap, this dude is psychotic and just a horrible person, very dangerous to be around, but you never really feel that in the chases, which I think is a massive problem in a movie like this. And that essentially goes for the whole story, where there just isn't really any tension in this movie at all. For having a grieving Charlize Theron being hunted in the Australian wilderness, they really don't capitalize on any of that, where, yes, in the beginning of the movie, like the first third, we get the backstory of like how Charlize Theron's partner was killed in the climbing accident, and we see some of the process behind that. But in the last hour, it just feels like the movie forgets to handle all of that, where the grieving parts just feel very surface level at that point. But then just the lack of tension in her being chased, it feels like they did not get the most out of the concepts that they were showing up in this first setup and everything. It doesn't help that the action in this movie is just so lame, and anything that could have been potentially very, very exciting just ended up being undercut by bland execution. There's one sequence in particular that I did get some enjoyment out of, where Charlize Theron, her hands are like tied up on the boat, then she like starts drowning in the water and everything, and she's trying to get herself back up and everything. That's a pretty cool idea, where she is completely tied up and she needs to try to, you know, not drown. So that's a cool idea, but again, I just don't think the execution in these sequences were all that great, making this just kind of like, okay, this is kind of cool for a little bit, but it didn't reach the potential that I thought this could have, and that kind of just goes for the rest of the action. That sense of danger, that amount of tension, I don't think was there in this, and I think this very much fits the mold of what Ben Affleck and Matt Damon were talking about in their interview about like how Netflix goes about writing their movies, where it's designed for people who are on their phones to like catch up and everything because they've been on their phones, or kind of just in the background while people are scrolling Instagram, TikTok, whatever. It does fit that whole second screen theory that people have with Netflix, where there's just so much that's just not happening in a bunch of times, and then we get a ramp up, they say what's been going on. It just very much feels written for people to be on their phones while the NFL draft is going on, like scroll through and see what their team's doing. That's kind of what this movie feels like it's made for. Very much the definition of a background movie. Now, before I give you my final thoughts, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because when you like, a clapperboard is going to appear, and when you subscribe, you get more of my movie-related content. Apex is not the apex of Netflix content. It's not even Prey, because I wouldn't choose to watch it again, and neither should you. If you want literal background noise, Apex is right there for you, and if you want a tension-filled chase in the wilderness, this movie is not for you. So my final score for this movie is going to be a 38%, which seems a little high given that I didn't really say anything positive about this movie in like the bulk of the review, but it's not that bad of a movie to that extent, but it's definitely not a good one, and everything I said about this rings true. There's zero tension, there's just nothing really there to cement this as a memorable Netflix thriller. It's a thrill with no thrills and a Netflix schlockbuster at best. At least I was able to make content out of it. That's the best use I get out of it. So thank you all for watching this movie review. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to get more content like this, and I'll see you all for the next one.